let's just kick it off here. Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm so glad again that we're here to talk about courage over comfort, whether you're joining us live or on replay. But before we get started, I do want to mention a quick note that today's discussion is being recorded. And the replay will be uploaded right here in this event post in our community. And I mentioned this because in case you want to join the conversation and ask a question and whatnot, I didn't want to throw anyone off or, catch anyone off guard. It is being recorded, but it's such a valuable conversation. It's so great to be able to step into that vulnerability so we can show everybody it's okay to be vulnerable and have the courage to do that. So let me ask this question of the group just to kind of get our minds thinking. Have you ever caught yourself in a moment where you're trying to work up the courage to do something, maybe ask a question, share an idea, or take a bold step? And in a split second, in that moment, self-doubt creeps in, even just for a split second moment. And instead of going for it, you end up falling back into inaction and staying in your comfort zone. I'm here to tell everyone that we've all been there. Everyone's been there. That tiny moment can change everything. And today we're diving into what really happens when we choose courage over comfort. What doors does it open? What opportunities it presents itself when we do that? And so I'm really thrilled to be joined by three masterful leadership coaches, each with their own unique specialty and perspective, to explore both the benefits and the pitfalls of comfort and how real growth often just begins to it just begins just beyond that comfort zone that we all like to sit back into. So let me start by introducing our incredible coaches today. First, we have Jamon Bailey, a transformative leader and coach who helps high-performing professionals align their success with their values and purpose. With over 20 years of experience across military, corporate, and healthcare industries, Jamon brings a grounded, real-world perspective to what it means to lead with authenticity and heart. And then I also want to introduce to you Liz Cruz. Liz is a queer leadership coach who helps leaders build radical confidence, emotional intelligence, and a leadership style that's uniquely their own. With more than a decade of experience in corporate leadership development and consulting, Liz brings both depth and warmth to her work, believing that the best leadership begins with deep self-knowledge and humanity. And then finally, joining them in this discussion is Lori Cunningham, our next gen career and leadership coach, passionate about empowering next gen professionals to develop leadership readiness and confidently navigate today's shifting workforce. Drawing on over 30 years of leadership experience, Lori helps emerging leaders step boldly into their next chapter and shape the future of leadership with clarity and purpose. What makes this panel extra special for me is that I've had the privilege of being personally coached by each of these masterful coaches, not just in my professional journey, but also in my own personal growth as well. Their wisdom, compassion, and courage have left a lasting impact on my life. There are things that all three of these coaches have coached me on that are still part of my life today. And I'm so grateful to share this space with them today. So let me just jump right in, right? Let me just jump right in. When it comes to Lori, when it comes to next gen leadership, what does comfort look like for your clients?
Yeah, I think that comfort zone, that's a psychological space for a lot of people where things feel familiar and safe. But it's also limiting. And so for them, it's, that it's showing up when they're feeling, stuck. So words that they may use is they're feeling stuck or they're feeling unchallenged or when their work no longer, excites them or stretches them. And we have that a lot with the younger generation. I'll say that younger generation, I say the next generation, but really it's this generation, that's the ones that are leading us. And really, when you can start to uncover those things, um, they're ready to go. They want to move on. They just don't know how. And so a lot of times it's when to use their voice and when not to use their voice in that demographic. And so that's the one thing that we really focus on is finding that voice, using that voice and being comfortable with your voice.
So it's not just about just work up the courage, willpower, or anything like that. It's also identifying when you're ready, when you know what that comfort is that you're falling back into.
Yeah, it really surrounds it. It really is around the confidence and building that confidence to feel that they have that voice to carry on. You might be sitting in a meeting and it's just like you said, how many times have we sat in a meeting and we're like, I really have a question, but I don't want to ask it.
Yeah.
And you're finding the right time, the right moment, and then the person next to you all of a sudden is just blurting it out, and you're like, "Oh man, I should have taken that opportunity." And then you wonder why that individual advances a little quicker than you might advance. And so it's really, looking at those types of situations and going, you know what do you have to lose?
Mm.
You don't have anything to lose by doing that and allowing them that space to understand that your voice, we need your voice. They want your voice. And getting rid of that fear of using that is one of the biggest challenges, I think.
Yeah, definitely. In Jaman, in the context of transformative leadership, what does comfort look like for your clients?
I think for my clients, it looks like understanding first the sameness that we have in different communities. There's one of the things that Lori mentioned about not being able to speak up in different situations when you have this concept, this idea that's on your mind, you feel like you're the only one that has it. In any situation, the reason why we struggle in discomfort is because we feel like we are the only one. And so, first of all, becomes recognizing your sameness and that you belong in the room that you're in. If you're in the room, you belong there. It's one of the things that I'm always encouraging my clients to understand is that if you're in the room, you belong there. And rather than feeling like you need to do something to be prepared to be in to make yourself qualified for the room, is recognizing that you're already in the room. And so
Mm.
it's recognizing your sameness. You're in a place along with others who you already see as special, as great, as equipped, as developed. You're in the same seats as they are. And so it's recognizing that sameness a lot with some of my clients. And that little shift can be transformative. I often find at times with my clients, it's not about making huge shifts. It's just helping them to see what's already present, what's already actually there. And when you can become more aware of what's present, then you can make those transformative shifts in your work, in your career, in your life, because you recognize your sameness, that we are all walking through a journey together, and your value is just as important as somebody else's.
Oh my gosh, that resonates so much with me. I'm a bit farther along in my career than some of my colleagues. And when I think about my colleagues and picture myself where I was there, I had that same, ooh, do I really belong here? How did I get here? They have the right to speak more first before me. And then once I started falling, once that sameness and that belonging felt more comfortable, I felt like okay, my confidence is coming out. When in reality, I was already there. I already belonged. I love that. Thank you. Liz, in the context of queer leadership, what does comfort look like for your clients?
Yeah. You know, I, I want to name the moment, which is that so many of us right now are living in deep discomfort, ranging into many of us are in are living in the danger zone right now, with a lot of things that are happening. And so as I was thinking about this week, I was thinking, well, there is, for many people, for those of us who are in the States, there is a lot of danger right now. And discomfort isn't the same thing as danger, but try telling your nervous system that. Our nervous system does not always know. And so a lot of what I'm practicing with my clients these days is a practice of discernment and being able to pay attention to, what are you feeling? What is happening in your body? What is your nervous system telling you about what's going on? And can we reality test that a little bit? Because I think right now, discomfort feels more dangerous than maybe it ever has. And so a lot of the work I'm doing with folks is, can we pull back from that a little bit? Because the Lori, to the example you gave of, well, if you're in a room and you have something to say what you want to say. That is probably not terribly dangerous in the way that it might feel to your body. So the skills I'm practicing with folks are certainly assertiveness, emotional self-awareness, and bringing our nervous systems back from a dysregulated place to be able to tolerate that space of discomfort a little bit.
Wow, what a distinction, right? Like you said, there's discomfort and then there's a feeling of danger, and being able to discern that is so important because it defines what you're going to do next, what you may or may do next. If you're falling back into safety or if you're falling back into comfort are two different things. Yeah. So when you think about each of your clients and in your specialties, when you think about like what it might mean, as we're starting to touch on it, what it might mean to choose courage and step out of their comfort zone, assuming we've already your clients have already discerned, okay, this a situation of discomfort or is this a situation of danger? What would be the next step to try to step out of their comfort zone? Well,
I'll go ahead. So, for me, it's not about reckless risk taking.
mhm.
And we're just kind of touching on that a little bit, but it's intentional stretching. So the one analogy that I often use with comfort zones, because look, I was the biggest comfort zone person there was as a young adult. And nothing is safe. So let's take the safe out of the equation, right? Comfort and safe. But I often use the analogy of an olive. And an olive is a fruit on a vine, and it has a purpose, and it can remain on that vine, but eventually it will wilt away. So it either needs to come off of the vine and have a use. It can be used for multiple things, or if it really wants to transform itself, it goes through and it can become olive oil, and it goes through that transformation of, it's not just, when we talk about comfort zones, you plant a seed and a little flower grows up. If it was like that, we would all be doing it. But for comfort zones, that olive to become olive oil, it can't just be squeezed, it has to be pressed. And so for something more to come out of that, it has to be pressed and pressed, because it's not just the outside that contains the skin is not the only thing that contains the oil. The inside is what generates the oil. And so there are going to be times where you are going to be pressed and just pressed and pressed and pressed, but that's when the most beautiful things from the inside come out. And so I often use that analogy with my clients is, do you want to be an olive? It has a purpose, or do you want to transform into something more, but know that it could hurt? It's going to press you outside of what you're used to, but what it can turn into is so much more than you can ever imagine. And so it's that pressing, it's uncomfortable, but it's necessary for that transformation.
Mm. So in terms of like next gen clients, what
Mhm.
kind of things do they, what kind of discomfort do they often have to overcome or face or accept the risks of?
Mhm. They're navigating that space of where, and we talked about this, the voice, right? Where
Mm,
do I use my voice? Where do I be seen?
mm,
They we want to get them pulled out of the just working hard.
mm-hmm,
It's more than just working hard, because if you're just working hard but you don't have a voice and you're not getting that visibility with stakeholders, you need strong mentors, you need sponsorships that are at the table with your name. If you're just working hard, you're that olive on the branch. You're there for a purpose, and then it will wilt away. And you're going to sit there and you're going to go, I'm working really hard. Why am I not advancing? You're not in the right rooms. You're not getting the right visibility. So what I try to do is give them the tools to say, okay, you need the visibility. So what do we do to get that visibility? Often the first step is using that voice. Be seen, be heard, than knowing what to say, right? Because you don't want to just blow things off, like it doesn't have any value to what you're saying. So it's just when you think of something, when you're in that meeting, use your voice and say, oh, well, can I ask this question? Yeah, ask the questions. That's the only way. You may not be in the same company, but you will get there. And you may have to change companies over and over. But if you continue just to be the hard worker with no voice and you're not seen, you're just going to still be that hard worker. And there's a place for hard workers, don't get me wrong. But when we talk about leadership and advancing, you've got to push forward. You've got to get uncomfortable. You've got to ask the questions. You've got to have the visibility. You've got to have the mentorship, and you've got to have the sponsorship. And that's what we work to get towards.
And I want to ask the same question of Jamon and Liz, but I kind of want to just tiptoe into the my next area of I want to ask is what might be the pitfalls, because I'm thinking of a colleague in particular who was that hard worker, and next thing you know, you blink, 11 years have gone by, 12 years have gone by, and they're frustrated, and now they're upset, they're angry, and the way their voice manifested in that situation was, where's my promotion, in this kind of angry, frustrated, resentful, entitled. It sounds entitled, but maybe they really deserved it, but the manner by which they approached it was a little bit too harsh, too late.
Yeah. Would you like me to go, Liz, or you want to go next?
Please go ahead. I'd love to hear.
Yeah, so it's interesting that when we think about stepping into courage, the assumption would be is that one person has more courage than another person. One of the things that I learned while I was a Marine in the Marine Corps is courage is not the absence of fear; it's acting despite of it. Somebody might assume that a Marine has more courage than another person might have courage, when that's not the truth. The reality is what I've learned through coaching pharmaceutical leaders in the height of vaccination development during COVID, through coaching military leaders, through coaching corporate executives, is that it's not that one person has more courage over another person. It's that that person may have more focus than another person. And what that is, and you're familiar with this, Charlotte, we talked about my principles of presence. One of those principles of presence is courage, and the key to unlocking courage is focus. Oftentimes, when we don't exhibit courage, what may prohibit us from taking the steps into courage is that we're too focused on all the steps and not clear on the stages. When you can become clear on the stages that you need to walk through, and get focused on what that plan might be. And so I focus on helping my leaders create and develop clear plans and strategies of how they're going to attack or focus on the next steps that they need to take. Rather than thinking about all the details, we want to think about all the details. What we want to do is get a high level picture of the stages we need to walk through so that you can have clear focus on where you are in this process and where you want to go next. When we can be focused, when we can be clear, we can take the sting out of fear. We take the sting out of fear when we get clear. And through focus and being having clarity on what your next stage is and what stage you're in and what stage you're going to can help you eliminate the concern and the worry and the anxiety that shows up about what's next. And we can be clear on what's next, on where I am, that current state and that future state, then we can take courage where we are because we feel like we know where we're going. Oftentimes, that's what lack of courage is just the fear of not knowing what's next. And so, if you can put together a clear plan and you can kind of take those steps, what I've noticed with some of my clients.
That makes so much sense. I recently heard somebody say something about oh my gosh, I just lost my train of thought. But you triggered a memory for me of something I heard about fear and oh, I lost it. Liz, did you have something that you could share with us
Oh
with
my gosh. Yeah, my mind is going so many places. I'm so appreciative of my colleagues here. Um, Lori, I love this metaphor of the olive on the branch. The metaphor I'm often using in my work is the butterfly. And I learned recently, I am so excited by this, that there's a caterpillar and there's a butterfly, and in between, in the chrysalis, the organism turns into goo. There's just nothing. And what I learned recently is that there are these cells. They are called imaginal cells, which I think is such a beautiful name. And they are within the caterpillar. They are the cells that in the goo have the instructions to start replicating themselves. And this imaginal cell becomes a wing, and this imaginal cell becomes an antenna. And the idea really is that, like, the butterfly, the genetic material, the instructions, the stuff of the butterfly has been there the whole time. And we must go through this transformation. We must go through this gooey place that sometimes feels like I have melted down the material to nothing. And so a lot of the work that I like to do with folks in that space is imagination. Can we, Jimon, to your point, can we picture a future? Can we set a destination? Can you imagine yourself as the leader you want to be, whether that's around assertiveness or your comfort giving difficult feedback to people or a promotion that you really want? Can you imagine yourself in that place? And then the activity I'll often have people do is, great, now make 3 lists. What are all the things you need to let go of? What are all of the things you're already doing that are assets to you right now? And what are the things you don't know or you don't have yet that you need to add on? And then from there, we can start working. And the work of, oh, I need to learn a new skill, often brings us to, like, well, that's comfortable. I know how to do that. And I think incrementally we can work through that really gooey, uncomfortable place by just taking the next step and the next step and the next step.
It sounds like you're deconstructing that framework of what the fear is sitting on. And it feels a little bit like there's some parallel in what Jamon was saying with respect to being clear.
Yeah. I mean, fear is always a protector. Fear is a part of ourself that really wants us to be safe. And what a gift that is, that we have, like, a built-in security team. Like, that's awesome.
Yeah.
And they don't always have the full picture. And so sometimes it takes going to that that security guard and saying, no, 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 this is okay. This situation's on the list. It's all right. Um, because yeah, that fear really can, I mean, it puts us into a survival space, and that's a very hard place to grow from.
Yeah.
Isn't that, I love that, Liz. Isn't fear just simply courage in an outcome you don't desire?
Mm,
It's courage to believe in an
mhm,
outcome you don't desire.
mhm,
And so if we flip fear and we have faith and confidence and hope to believe in an outcome we do desire,
mhm,
then we can move beyond fear, move beyond discomfort, because we can choose, right? We get to choose the outcome that we hope for.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. And that outcome that we don't desire, oftentimes that worst case scenario thinking often doesn't happen anyway, especially if you are intentional about going towards the thing that you do desire. So, um, Jamal, why do you think it is that personal and professional growth often require discomfort?
Yeah, I was thinking about something when Lori started to talk about nature, right? In the this idea of olives and things growing, you get thinking about a garden. My wife loves to garden. She's got the Home and Garden show coming up here in another week. She'll be on the stage, HGTV, and all these different things. And I'm super happy and excited for her and all the things that she's doing. And she's always pulling seeds, preparing seeds, all these things, different types of things. The reality is that in everywhere in life, we go from a barren wilderness place to a place of productivity. Everything in life works that way. You start off in life as a young adult, if you're talking about someone who's new in their career, like as Lori coaches, individuals who are emerging leaders, you start off without the thing you desire. And in order to get to the next stage, you have to work, you have to build, you have to work connections, you have to struggle oftentimes through different situations in order to grow into a new place. And by the time you get to an executive level, what should have happened is you should have mastered the process of lack, blessing, lack, blessing, lack, blessing, from struggle to growth, struggle to growth, struggle to growth. And the reason why it takes that is because life does not exist without that. I don't know anything in life that I have had of any value that I've not had to work for. Anything that you get that you have not worked for, you will not appreciate. And so, in order to appreciate, in order to find the joy, in order to get beyond fear in a situation, you have to work through it. I think about everything with my children. There are certain areas in my children's life that I'm so grateful that they get to stand on my shoulders, and there are things that they don't have to endure because I've endured them for them. But what they've missed in that process, and what I've shielded them from oftentimes, is the struggle to own it so that way when they get to another difficult season, they know what it feels like to walk through it. Right? So then they're naturally on their own anyway, learning the process of lack, struggle, growth, lack, struggle, growth. They're going to learn it anyway. And sometimes I think I'm protecting them from it. But the reality is that they're going to go through it. If they're going to be successful in any area of their life, they're going to have to go through struggle. My daughter is an amazing musician and artist. And she writes songs for artists. She sings. She produces, and she is in this season in her life where she is going through struggle. Right? It is hard right now, and she's going through this struggle. But I see her in the future, and it looks so much better than it does right now,
mhm,
right? Because she's taking courage to walk through the process. And I think it has to happen because that is the process towards success. There is no easy way to the mountain. If you're going to climb the mountain, you have to climb the mountain. And this is the last, and I'll leave it. I was at a leadership conference a week ago, and John Maxwell was there. And I love it when he says it. He says this. He said there was someone who came up to him and asked the question or made the statement and said, "Hey, I want to do what you do." And he said, "That's interesting. do you want to did what I did? Because if you want to
Mm.
do what I do, you have to did what I did. And
Ooh,
what I did was over 14,000 speeches to put myself in a position to be able to communicate to you in the way that you receive it. Do you want to did what I did? Do you want to spend the nights that I spent laboring over my lesson? Do you want to spend the nights I spent not going out and hanging out, but studying the message I was going to share? Do you want to did what I did?
oh my
You want
gosh.
to do what I do. And so if we're going to get to the mountain, we got to walk through the struggle. There's no other way through that.
Wow. I'm writing that one down.
Mm.
Do you want to did what I did? I love that. I love that. It really does put to the forefront the importance of that struggle that so many people are afraid of having. You know, pain and suffering are two different things. And sometimes the pain is important, but it's good pain. It's pain that gets you to that forward somewhere else that you might want to get to for that growth.
Mm.
And if there was just one mountain, to Jamon's point, life is more, there's more than one mountain. So once you reach that mountain, guess what? You had to be uncomfortable. You were exhausted, you were uncomfortable, you had to push through to get to the top of that mountain. And you're looking, well, guess what? Now you got to come down off that mountain. And it's just like you said, there's different seasons, there's different times. You're going to go up and you're going to go down. And then when you come off that mountain and you get that little bit of a break, you got another one you got to climb. And it's really being intentional, right? About, okay, I know this is going to be uncomfortable, but I'm prepared to do it. I know that I can do it. I did it before, I can do it again. And so that is then in that journey that Jamal was talking about is if it was just one mountain, great. But that climb to that mountain is going to prepare you for that next mountain and that next mountain and that next mountain. And it just depends on how many mountains you are willing and want to climb. There is no set number. It's just where are you, if you want to go to the next one, that it's going to be a journey, it's going to be hard, but you can get there. And so much, I mean, we're seasoned here, and it brought up a thought for me, when I was coaching someone about their kids. I said, you have to let them go through it. That's the only way they're going to learn. We want to protect. We've been there, we've done that. But we've also been where our parents, we listened, we had parents that were telling us and we didn't listen. And so here we are doing the same thing in that protection mode. But it's like you gotta let your hands go, and you just gotta let them go through it, let them get uncomfortable and climb that mountain, just as Jamon said. It was a great analogy. So thank you for that.
Yeah, I love that. And then when I think about like um that mountain at some point, we got to be able to zoom out and realize that there's a bigger mountain that I might want to get to, right? It's not just hopping from one mountain to the next. When we zoom out, we realize, oh, I'm on a hill. I thought I was on a mountain, but I'm on a hill. So how can we learn uh, to figure out when we are playing small, when it's hard to zoom out. We could enjoy being at the peak of the mountain, being the king or queen of the mountain. How can we realize and recognize, hey, there's a bigger mountain that I might want to climb and be ready for something a little riskier.
I, I want to advocate here for rest and reflection as part of this cycle,
Mhm.
because I think that's the only way, right? Otherwise, we're like, we come down and then we're immediately up another mountain, and we come down and we're immediately up. And um, to this point,
Oh no.
oh,
Oh, there, you're back.
okay. To this point that you made of like the the want and then the having, and then the want and then the having, there's a really important moment in that cycle, whether it's at the top of the mountain or it's in the valley, of just stopping and saying, okay, let me collect myself. What am I experiencing? What do I need to resource myself for the next dream? how might I perhaps consider my resources differently? The further we want to go, the more I think there's a real benefit of leaning to collectivism, because there's, I think, often a myth in our culture that everything can be done through individual effort. And I know, certainly know that that's not true for me. I sometimes just need someone to make me dinner so I can so I can keep going, right? And so
Yeah.
that those opportunities to rest, to stop, to zoom out, to be in a moment of completion before starting a new cycle, I think are so important.
And I think that speaks to not only protecting yourself from burnout, which is what I'm hearing you say, but it's also a great time for that reflection to be intentional about your next step and not just any old mountain, the
Mhm,
mountain I want to climb.
mhm. Yeah, I think often part of how we get to burnout is that we've randomized ourselves. We've
Mhm.
moved in too many different directions without knowing where we're going. Or I think, Lori, you were talking earlier about someone who might stay at a company for a really long time. They never get that promotion. They're starting to feel resentful. Uh, Resentment, in my mind, I tell people this all the time, that anger is what happens when somebody else crosses our boundaries, and resentment is what happens when we cross our own boundaries over and over and over again.
Mhm.
And I think that the danger of not stopping and reflecting is we randomize, we cross our own boundaries, we burn ourselves out, we don't know where we're going. Yeah. So that zoom out, I think, is a really important piece.
Yeah. What an important distinction, I think, between resentment and anger. Um,
Charlotte,
okay.
you were asking about playing, small. I think really listening to yourself. So a lot of times readiness is when that discomfort might be paired with curiosity or excitement. And then you feel like that stretching is possible. So you were mentioning, how do you know when you're playing small? And I think it's each individual, and playing small feels easy, but when it starts to start feeling unfulfilling, that I think is when you start to say, you know what, I might be thinking small, it's just unfulfilling to me. And then that's when you start kind of exploring maybe your readiness for something else that might give you excitement, or that you're going to be stretched. So it's kind of paired both ways. How are you feeling about where you're at right now?
Mhm. Yeah. Um, that's so important about the unfulfilling being an indication that maybe you're playing small, that you're ready for the next step.
Yeah, lack of
No.
fulfillment oftentimes comes from pursuing one, the thing that's unrealistic, and often two, the thing that isn't really what you would want to pursue. Because if we're going to that mountain, to Liz's point, if we don't stop and assess to see whether or not this is where I actually want to be, or is this where somebody else thinks I should be? Like, where am I at right now? And so a burnout will take place not just because of activity. Usually people don't burn out from doing too much. They usually burn out from doing more than they should based on what their longings are pulling them towards. And so we gotta be careful to not strive. I think you had said a little something earlier, Charlotte. The difference between I can't remember the exact words you use, but the difference between it's kind of like striving and actually pursuing something worthwhile.
Hmm.
There's a big difference between pursuing a worthy goal and striving towards the achievements that others have in mind.
Mm, that reminds me that, and it's something that just commonly falls into, I don't know if it's my feed because of what I look at, or I'm just very mindful of this, but our sense of purpose in the thing, and that kind of ties in with the fulfillment. And so if we're striving for something somebody else expected versus something that we're expecting, that burnout would certainly happen differently. right? Interesting. Okay, so assuming that we've identified, okay, there's a bigger mountain that I want to get to, what are some beginning steps that we could take to step out of our comfort zone and still feel safe? And I think we've touched on this a little bit already, right? But maybe if we can dive a little bit deeper into it. Jamon, what are your thoughts on that in terms of just like what are some first steps that our clients can start thinking about?
One of the things that I'm encouraging individuals to do in this season is to, as you think about dealing with crisis, whenever you think about dealing with crisis, there is a book that was written by two doctors, Wharton Business School, called The Prepared Leader. And they, in that book, outline 5 phases of crisis and some of the different things that you need to do in terms of dealing with a crisis. Oftentimes, a crisis is something that happens to you out of the blue. You're not aware. The crisis happens, and all of a sudden you're in the crisis, you're in the situation, and it's difficult. What I'm encouraging individuals to do in order to take courage over discomfort or over comfort is to actually put yourself in intentional discomfort, to find ways to discomfort yourself. And that might look like a exercise routine. That might look like fasting. That might look like choosing how you spend in normal ways and paying attention to those things. What are the areas where you're always pursuing comfort as a shield to your pain? Because we naturally will find ways to soothe and satisfy ourselves, right? Human beings are pain avoiding, pleasure seeking creatures. And whenever there is pain, we will avoid the pain by seeking some sort of pleasure, which is why my food bill is so high in my house, right? And so we always, and sometimes even a credit card bill, right? Because we will find ways to soothe the pain that we feel. So, how can you put yourself intentionally? How can you choose to put yourself into what I call a wilderness state? Right? A wilderness state. There are 3 ways that we go into the wilderness. One way is when we do something that we shouldn't have done. We didn't plan properly. We didn't prepare properly. We made a poor decision and we go into a difficult state where there's lack. And then another way is someone else, completely disconnected to you, has made a decision that affects you, that somehow pushes you into a wilderness situation reactively. But you can also go into that state on your own. And anytime you go into a wilderness state, it is a place of testing. It's a place of preparation. And so you can initiate the wilderness. And if you initiate the wilderness, you actually push yourself into a place to take courage in the middle of discomfort. So
Mm.
that way, when the crisis happens, when a difficult season happens, you're not surprised by how you feel. And you've learned ways to manage your discomfort so it doesn't show up in reactive outbursts to your coworkers or reactive outbursts to your partner or something that you do to try to soothe yourself that doesn't consider the others around you. Right. And so that's one of the ways that I'm encouraging my clients to do is to create your own discomfort. Is to take charge of that place in your life.
So you can practice and prepare for that discomfort, doesn't catch you off guard, and you can respond in a manner that's more intentional.
Mhm.
Love it. Love it. Any thoughts, Liz, on where your clients can begin to step out of their comfort zone and still feel safe?
Yeah, I think a lot about, I think similarly, resourcing for that journey. I do a lot of work in my practice with tarot, and many of my clients are very familiar with that system of intuition. And the very first card in the deck is the Fool. And this is a character who is going on a journey and it's going to be transformative. And they are walking toward the edge of a cliff with their knapsack and their dog, and they're going to step off the cliff. They're going to take that leap of faith. And so in some ways there are no 2 ways about it, right? Like you are going to have to take a leap of faith. You're going to have to do something different than what you have ever done before if you want to create transformation. And my question at this point is, what's in that knapsack?
Mm.
What are your resources for this journey? What can you take along with you? And for some people, that's thinking about their people who can support them. For some people, that's writing a letter to themselves that they can open up when things get hard along the way from their past self, saying, hey, just reminding you you're going someplace really important, so keep going. But I like to talk kind of upfront about what are the resources you already have that have prepared you, because you wouldn't be in this place. You wouldn't be about to take that leap of faith if you weren't ready in some way to do it. So you have resources that you might not even be aware of. And let's just take an inventory before we jump.
And I imagine that's such an effective exercise that you could, as a coach, can do with your clients to help dig that out. Because if all I'm doing is looking in my knapsack, but I have blinders on, I don't see my resources.
Yeah.
Lori, for your clients, what are some, what are your thoughts on how your clients can begin to step out of their comfort zone and still feel safe?
Yeah, so the one common word that we're all using today is fear. And I think we can all agree that that's the number one factor that keeps people from moving forward in any situation and getting uncomfortable, whatever fear that looks like. But I think we have to normalize that term fear. It's not a stop sign. It shouldn't be a stop sign. You recognize it, um, because that is the signal that you're on the edge of growth. So fear is serving you in a way that you can either allow it to hinder you, or you can allow it and recognize it to say, hey, something greater is going to happen here and I need to push through it. A lot of that is surrounded around assumptions. We make assumptions. I've tried this before and it didn't work out. And okay, well, try it again. It may work out in a different environment. But you can also reframe fear as receiving feedback. It means that you're expanding capacity. Um, Practical tools for from a career and leadership is just saying yes to projects. Start getting that visibility around that. I encourage people to get mentorships. I'm very strong. You have to have a good, strong mentorship. The one thing for me, and I'm going to use me as an example, is I identified at a very young age that I needed a mentor that was totally opposite of me. And I mean that from the standpoint of I knew that I was more of a reserved individual. And so I needed someone who was going to pull that out. Somebody who, I may not like at all. Like our personalities are completely different, but I needed that to pull out what I needed. I can do the same thing over and over again, but if I don't get the skill sets that I need to overcome some of the challenges that I have, I'm just going to be doing the same thing over and over again. So I encourage a mentor that is really going to push you outside of your comfort zone, has different skills than what you have. Someone who is really outgoing, who is really going to hold you to the fire. I believe that is the one thing that's going to help develop you into a strong leader, is when you can pull from different resources as well. You're not going about this alone, because you can't go through life alone. You can't go through your career alone. And if you want to get into those leadership roles and those C-suites, they don't do it alone. They partner with strong people. You got to be open to strong feedback. You can't say, well, I didn't like what they said to me and I'm going to go a different direction. You want that strong feedback. You need somebody to push you. And so with that combination of embrace the fear, it's there for a reason. Just decide how it's going to serve you. Is it going to stop you, Or is it going to say, you know what, something greater is coming? And so I just encourage people to push through it as hard as they want to push through. If it's something they want, they'll figure out a way to get there. So, but that's kind of where I'm at, just the practicality of, but find people that will push you outside of that.
Wow, such great direction from all three coaches. I could talk to you forever, but I am mindful of the time, and I want to make sure I set aside some time for viewers to ask questions if they have any. But I just kind of want to leave this thought that came up in my mind is something that I ask my kids all the time when they say, "Oh, I don't want to do X, Y, and Z. I'm uncomfortable doing that." And I said, what if you're comfortable with being uncomfortable? What are the possibilities? What what can what can you do and achieve and have if you were just comfortable with being uncomfortable? And it speaks to everything all of our coaches in this panel have talked about in that preparedness. So let me stop yamming my mouth and make sure that I give some time for any questions if anyone has any questions or thoughts or share something you want to share. Okay. So I'm going to take this as Kimberly,
Oh, okay.
you unmuted.
Of course, I'm going to be comfortable with being uncomfortable. The whole idea of growing up and being in school and raising your hand was always nerve-wracking. If you thought you knew the answer, you didn't know the answer, and the other kids are like, "Oh, you're such a brown noser and you're showing off," and we get labeled for a teacher's pet and all that kind of stuff, and we want to fit in, we want to belong. And I think conformity is where we started to belong. We pulled back, we didn't shine. And um, yeah, I don't think that the system created leaders per se, even though schools think that they are, quote, creating leaders, or you go off to college and, Yale, we're creating leaders, or we'll go to the military and we're creating leaders. I don't know if you can create a leader, and that would be a good question. Can you create a leader, or do you discover that this person is here to lead?
Jamon, do you want to take that?
The Marine Corps says that leaders are not born, they're made. Um,
Do you believe that?
I believe, yeah, that's what I was going to explain. I believe that they're not born or made. I think they're both born then made.
Mm.
I think that there is a natural innate desire for someone who desires to move people beyond where they are. And I don't think that that is taught as much as it's a burden. Oftentimes it comes, in my experience, through some other experience of pain that that person has had to go through, that they are willing to step up and lead. Um, I I often don't see leaders who haven't gone through anything, leaders who've had it safe or yeah. So I think they're both born, and then I think that they're made.
I'm an avid oh, est person, landmark. And I was in team leadership and management program. And one of the things they talked about when it came to leadership was that leadership was granted. And so when I would coach business people, it would be, does are you granted leadership? Do they want you to lead? Kind of like Moses. I think of Moses as he was granted leadership. And so I do think that leaders can be created. I was not that I want to say it, I was saying it differently, but yeah, I do think that they can be created when somebody says, "We'll support you as the leader."
Yeah.
And that's a different way of looking at it. But I love the fact that you're all in leadership, which is very cool. You know, um, so thank you for transforming whatever group you're transforming. I think it's much needed. Uh,
Yeah.
recognize the difference between pacing yourself into a state of discomfort versus danger, whether it's physical, mental, or moral. Anyway, thank you for answering that. And it took Lori or Liz, what do you think?
Yeah,
Are
I
they
always like for
creative?
people to define leader for me. So leader, is a leader is not necessarily the title, but it's someone who can influence. They have responsibility and service, and so not so much a title. And we often stamp leadership with a title, but we forget that it's about the individuals that can influence us. They take responsibility and service, and a leader honestly would be someone who chooses most of the time courage over comfort. That's how they got there, and they're there now. They know that they've got to choose, and it's still uncomfortable sometimes, but they still have to choose that courage over comfort, and they step into challenges and vision. And the key to a leader is they empower others to rise with them as well. And so a lot of times when we talk about leaders, I like for people to define it to me. Like, what is your definition of leader? I do believe that a leader can have some natural attributes, but I also agree that they are built. It's what has been put into them. They can be trained leaders, and I also think it's a natural ability at the same time.
Mm. I
Thank you.
agree with so much of what's been said. I'll just add that I think in an environment where there is often an invitation to lead, an invitation to develop as a leader, it's worth noticing who's invited and who's not. We've lost 300,000 Black women from our workforce in the US this year, at a time that I think we really need to be following Black women. We really need to be listening to what Black women are saying. And so I always feel this is certainly a theme in queer leadership, but I think is just always worth noticing is what are the qualities that make us say, ooh, let's invite that person. Let's name that person as a leader or a potential leader. That's a dissertation we'll have to have another gathering for, but worth paying attention to, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. Such powerful conversation. Like I said, I could keep talking to you guys for forever, but I do want to respect everyone's time. If our coaches panelists have a few more minutes, Carl does have a question, if you don't mind me bringing it in. Carl's question is, how do I recognize the difference between placing yourself into a state of discomfort versus danger, whether it's physical, mental, or morale? Moral?
I'm gonna jump in because I do have to jump off, and I saw this question and I want to just give an answer to it.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think the answer lies in two things. One, examining what is happening for my nervous system, what's the reaction that I'm having. And the second is reality testing. What am I reacting to? If I play this out, what is the risk in this situation? And is the risk that I might be embarrassed, or is the risk that I might lose my job, or that something really bad might happen to me? And when you play that out and reality test the risk, then you can make decisions based on the relative risk. So I'm going to pop that in. And I am so sorry I have to jump, but I'm
Thank you so
so
much.
glad I got to spend this time with you all.
Thank you so much, Liz.
Liz.
Okay, so I'm gonna just put it out there on Liz's behalf. You can reach Liz at www.lizcruzconsulting.com, and she's also a member here at Inspire, Empower, Achieve. So you can direct message her here, as well as, if you have a general question or thought or feedback or suggestion, or just a share, that you can post something in brave voices, Inspire, Empower, Achieve. And Liz will see your post if you'd like to connect that way. And let me go ahead and give Jaman a couple of minutes to just talk about how people can work with you and how they can reach you.
Yeah, thanks for this question, Carl. We miss you so much over at Turf Valley, by the way. But I love to answer this question, right? Because my background is in simulations and modeling. My background was in simulations and modeling while I was in the military and out of the military, working with government leaders to put them in situations where they could test, do what they call pre-deployment training standards. So before you deploy into a danger zone, into a war zone, the goal is to identify what are the things that you need to do in advance to develop yourself to be ready to deploy. And so part of our job was to create environments, models, simulations that would take them through the things they need to do. A great example would be, how do I react to small arms fire? Right? And so you know all the things that you need to do in order to react to small arms fire. So to answer that question, placing yourself into a state of discomfort versus danger would look like, what is the simulated place that I control, that I can do on my own, whether that's through, Lori mentioned feedback, through things of that nature, through putting myself, taking advantage of opportunities that are lower risk, that I can practice the skills I need to develop when I actually get into the real world situation. Because once you're in danger, it's too late to figure out what you don't know,
Mm.
right? If you're in a fight, it's too late to realize that you don't know how to throw a left hook and put your guards up. You need to practice that beforehand. Similarly, with environments with the workplace, once you're in a high stakes, high demand role that requires empathy, compassion, that requires you to be decisive, to make quick decisions under duress, you need to have already been in situations where you've practiced that before you've gotten there. So
It's a
find a
rehearsal.
situation you can control. Yeah.
It's a rehearsal. It's just like fire drill for the workplace or even for our kids in school. You're rehearsing
Hmm.
and getting comfortable with discomfort.
Yeah.
Wow. Jamal, can you speak about how people can work with you and how they can get in touch with you?
Yes. So you can find me online website, Following the Leader is the name of my business, FTLINU.com. So that's Follow the Leader in You. It's FTLINU.com. Or in the quickest way though is right through LinkedIn. I do a lot of engagement with individuals on LinkedIn. You can DM me, you can message me, you can find a link to connect with me, whether you're an organization who wants to develop leadership presence and coach-centric leadership skills for your team, or you're an individual leader who wants to learn how to develop better leadership presence with your team as well. So LinkedIn is the quickest way to get a hold of me.
Thank you. Thank you. Lori, can I give you 2 minutes to talk about how people can work with you and how they can connect with you?
Yeah, so you can find me on 365horsepower.com or through IEA, either way, or LinkedIn, any way you prefer. I'll take it anyway. What we do is I can do a la carte coaching, but I do have a program that is kind of a 3 series program that takes you from A to Z, from where you are now all the way through to mock boardrooms and getting you ready and prepared for leadership roles. So kind of meet you where you're at there, and then we will drive that through all the way to mock boardroom type situations, and finding the right sponsorships and just getting that preparedness, skill gaps. All of those things will work together and really give you a strong foundation to move forward. The comfort zone is where olives stay on the vine. All right. But that's stagnant. So the pressing is uncomfortable, but it's the only way to release the oil inside. In our careers and our leadership, courage is choosing to the pressing over the preserve. So that's when that transformation happens. So I encourage you to keep stepping through. You know, Carl, you had asked, that's okay, but to his remark, you know, I would just ask yourself, am I uncomfortable because this is new? Or am I being asked to compromise my safety, my mental health, or moral compass? So that's another identifier is, am I feeling uncomfortable, or is this really putting me in that danger? So thank you guys for this opportunity. It's been amazing. I could talk about it for days. There's so much to unwrap here, and I appreciate the other panelists on here. It was a great conversation. So thanks for the time.
Yes, fantastic. Thank you so much. And with 6 minutes over time, I'm sorry for taking up more time than I promised, but I love this conversation, and you guys have been so impactful in my life in the past, in the present, and I'm pretty sure I'm gonna bring it into my future too. So thank you all.
Thank you.
Look forward to the replay, and thank you, Carl, Zoe, and Kimberly, Amy. Thank you for joining us today. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, everybody.
Everybody.